On the 14th of May, 2002, a girl was born at the Portland Hospital in London. Her parents named her Margarita Elizabeth Rose. Margarita is the Spanish and Italian form of Margaret, and Margaret Rose was the full name of her grandmother, Princess Margaret, the younger sister of the Queen. So this child carries her grandmother's name twice over, in two different places. Her grandmother had died on the 9th of February that year, 3 months earlier. She never met her. Not once. There is no photograph of the two of them, because there could not be. And she has spent 23 years carrying that woman's name around a country that has extremely strong opinions about her. I am Richard, and this is Richard Valentin. Now, the title of tonight's program calls these grandchildren living proof that the rebel never left the Windsors. And I have spent this week reading everything published about all four of them, and I have to tell you that it is not right. And I think what is actually true is considerably more interesting, because they are not rebels. There is a potter who trained as a yoga teacher in India. There is a Royal Marine. There is a musician who studied product design engineering at Loughborough. And there is a jewelry designer who trained in Paris. Not one of them has been in any trouble whatsoever. Not one of them has sold a story, written a book, given a tell-all interview, or embarrassed anybody. 2 of them have Instagram accounts, and one of those is private with about 400 followers. They are, by any measure you care to use, exceptionally well-behaved and exceptionally private. So if the woman known for 50 years as the rebel princess produced descendants like that, then something needs explaining, and the explanation is the whole program. Here it is in one line, and then I will spend half an hour showing you the working. They did not need to rebel, because Princess Margaret had already removed the thing you rebel against. Let us go back to 1955, because you cannot understand any of this without it. Princess Margaret Rose was born in 1930 at Glamis Castle in Scotland. She was the younger daughter of the Duke and Duchess of York, and like her sister, she was not expected to be anywhere near the throne, because her uncle was going to be king and was expected to have children. Then in December 1936, her uncle abdicated. Her father became King George VI, and she was 6 years old. Her sister became heir, and Margaret became the other one. I want to say something about that position, because it is the least examined role in the whole institution, and it is a genuinely difficult one. The heir has a job. It is an enormous job with no exit, but it is a job, and it comes with purpose and structure and a reason to get up. The spare has the same restrictions and none of the purpose. All of the scrutiny, all of the rules about who you may marry and what you may say and where you may go, and no actual work, because the work belongs to somebody else. And then in 1953, she fell in love with a man called Peter Townsend. He was a group captain in the Royal Air Force. He had been a fighter pilot in the Battle of Britain, which in the Britain of 1953 was about as close to heroism as a man could get. He had been a quarry to her father. He was also 16 years older than her, and he was divorced. Now, I need to explain what divorced meant in 1953, because it is genuinely difficult to convey now. The Church of England did not then permit the remarriage of divorced people while a former spouse was living. The sovereign is supreme governor of that church. And under the Royal Marriages Act of 1772, Margaret required the Queen's consent to marry before the age of 25. After 25, the position changed, and she could, in theory, have proceeded by giving notice to the Privy Council and waiting 12 months. But she was then given to understand what that would cost. She would have had to renounce her rights of succession. There was the question of her income under the civil list. There was the question of whether she could remain in the country. And in October 1955, she issued a statement. She said she had decided not to marry him. She said she was mindful of the Church's teaching that Christian marriage is indissoluble and mindful of her duty to the Commonwealth. She was 25 years old. She lived another 47 years. Now, I am not going to sit here and tell you that one decision explains an entire life, because that is the kind of tidy psychology that makes for good television and bad history. She was a complicated woman, and she made a great many of her own choices afterwards, some of them badly. But it is a fact, and it is the central fact, that at 25 she wanted a thing and was told that the price of it was everything else, and she paid the other way. She married Anthony Armstrong-Jones in 1960. He was a photographer, and it is worth remembering how startling that was at the time. He was not aristocracy. He worked for a living, with his hands and with a camera, and the marriage was seen as an extraordinary modernization. He was created Earl of Snowdon. They had 2 children, David, born in 1961, and Sarah, born in 1964. They divorced in 1978, which was the first divorce of a senior member of the royal family since Henry VIII. And somewhere in all of that, Margaret made a decision about her children, which I think is the single most deliberate thing she ever did. She said this about them, and it has been quoted many times since. She said that her children are not royal, and that they just happen to have the Queen for their aunt. Now read that carefully, because there is a whole philosophy in it. She is not complaining. She is not being modest. She is stating a boundary, publicly, on purpose, and she is stating it about people who could easily have been positioned otherwise. David and Sarah were, at birth, extremely close to the throne. Sarah was 7th in line the day she was born in 1964. 7th. That is closer than several people who have spent their whole lives as working royals. And their mother said, in effect, they are not part of this. They were sent to ordinary schools. David went to Bedales, which is a progressive independent school in Hampshire, and so did Sarah. They were encouraged to make things. They were pushed towards craft and towards art, which was their father's world rather than their mother's. David became a furniture maker, not a nominal one. He trained at Parnham College in Dorset and founded a company making furniture, and he later chaired Christie's in the United Kingdom. He is now the 2nd Earl of Snowdon. Sarah became a painter. She studied at Camberwell School of Art and at Middlesex Polytechnic. She married Daniel Chatto, an actor who became an artist in 1994. And there is a constitutional detail about David that I had not appreciated until this week, and it is rather striking. David Armstrong-Jones is the first person in the line of succession who is not a direct descendant of Queen Elizabeth II. Everybody ahead of him comes down from her. He comes down from her sister. He is the point at which the line stops being about one woman's children and starts being about her father's. Right, the 4 grandchildren. Let me take them one at a time, and I am going to stick strictly to what they have themselves said in public or what has been formally published, because these are private people who have not asked to be discussed. Samuel Chatto, born in the summer of 1996, the eldest. He is a ceramicist, a potter. That is his actual profession, and his work is exhibited. He has described where it came from, and I liked his explanation because it is a description almost every creative person will recognize. He said he had always had a strong affinity with making objects, that he spent much of his childhood building imagined landscapes and sculptural models, and that this led him naturally to clay in his later years at school. A boy making landscapes on the floor, and then a man at a wheel. In 2019, he trained as a yoga teacher in India at Rishikesh in the Himalayan foothills. He wrote afterwards that although he had no plans to teach, it had been an eye-opening experience that he was deeply grateful for. He has been in a relationship since 2022 with Eleanor Exurgian, who is an artist and the daughter of an arts professor. And I mention that only because both of them have appeared publicly together and it has been reported straightforwardly. He attended the late Queen's state funeral in 2022, the coronation in 2023, and the royal Christmas gathering in 2024. He is 30th in line to the throne. Arthur Chatto, born on the 5th of February, 1999. Samuel's younger brother. He is a Royal Marine. He undertook officer training. Now, I want to stop on that for a moment. The Royal Marine selection process is widely regarded as the hardest in the British Armed Forces, and the officer route harder still. Nobody in that world cares who your great-aunt was. You either complete it or you do not. That is a young man from an artistic, gentle, extremely private family who went and did the most physically brutal thing available in British public life. Charles Armstrong-Jones, Viscount Linley, born on the 1st of July, 1999. David's son. He is the only one of the 4 who has a title, because he is heir to the Snowdon earldom and holds the courtesy title while his father lives. He went to Eton and then to Loughborough University, where he studied product design engineering. He has more recently been described as a musician, and his sister told Tatler that he is very much into his orchestral music. He has an Instagram account which is private, with something in the region of 400 followers, which tells you everything you need to know about how he wishes to live. And there is one detail about his childhood that I find genuinely moving. He spent a couple of years living at Kensington Palace as a small boy. The reporting on that is that the family wanted to be near Margaret as she approached the end of her life. Margaret had a stroke in 1998. There were further strokes. In her final years, she used a wheelchair and her sight was seriously affected. She died in February 2002, aged 71. So a family moved into a palace so that a very small boy could be near his grandmother while she was dying. He was 2 when she died. He will not remember her. And then Lady Margarita. Born on the 14th of May, 2002, 3 months after her grandmother died. Educated at Garden House School, then St. Mary's Ascot, then Tudor Hall, then Oxford Brookes University, and then at the Haute École de Jewellery in Paris, which is one of the oldest jewelry schools in Europe. She now runs her own jewelry brand, called Matita. Most of you will have seen her once without knowing it. She was one of the bridesmaids at the wedding of the Prince and Princess of Wales in 2011. She was 8 years old, and she was on the balcony. She gave a rare interview to Hello, and I want to give you 2 things she said. On her grandmother, she said that Margaret was an international influence of style and fun. Think about that phrasing from a 22-year-old about a woman she never met. Style and fun. Not tragedy. Not the rebel princess. Not the sad story that this country has told about Margaret for 70 years. And she was careful about it. She said that she supposed it played into her own work, but not solely, that everyone is different, and that she does what comes naturally to her. That is somebody who has clearly thought about how much of a dead woman she is willing to be. And then she said something about her father, and this is the sentence that made me want to make this program. She said her creativity came from being always encouraged to be interested and to ask questions, and that this was what her father was adamant about. Her father is David, Margaret's son. So the thing Margaret gave David, David gave Margarita. Be interested, ask questions, make things. That is a rule being handed down through 3 generations, and it started with a woman who was not allowed to ask for the one thing she wanted. Now let me argue against my own program, because I have been sentimental for 20 minutes, and some of you will be getting restless. Here is the case that none of this is remotely admirable. First, this is not exactly hardship. Eton, St. Mary's Ascot, Oxford Brookes, a jewelry school in Paris, Bedales. These are not the schools of people who have been cast out of anything. Whatever Margaret renounced on their behalf, she did not renounce money, connections, or the ability to open every door in London. Second, being a private person is easier when you have a private income. Following your creative passion is an option available to a rather small number of people. Most young people who want to be a potter get a job in a warehouse and do the pottery at weekends, and a great many of them stop. Third, they are still in the family. Samuel was at the state funeral and at the coronation and at the royal Christmas in 2024. They are not exiles. They are inside, at the family events, in the photographs, with the surname doing quiet work in the background of every professional introduction they will ever have. Fourth, Margaret's own conduct is not beyond criticism. She was, by many accounts, difficult, imperious, and capable of insisting on precedence at exactly the moments other people found it hardest. There is a version of this story where a woman who demanded that everybody stand up when she entered a room, raised children she told not to bother, and where those 2 things sit awkwardly together. I think all 4 of those objections are fair. I would not want to argue against any of them. But here is what survives them, and it is the thing I keep coming back to. She did not have to do it. Sarah was 7th in line at birth. Margaret could have had her children brought forward. She could have pushed them into the working royal family, secured them positions, and made them senior figures. There was every mechanism available, and she was more than capable of using it. She did the opposite, deliberately, and she said so publicly, and she made it stick for 2 generations. Sarah Chatto was 7th in line the day she was born. Today, in 2026, she is 29th. 22 places, over 62 years, entirely by other people being born. And in all that time, so far as anybody has published, She has never once complained about it. Now, what we do not know. We do not know a great deal, and I want to be clear that this is by design, and I approve of it. We do not know what Samuel or Arthur or Charles think about the monarchy, because none of them has said. We do not know what Margarita's business turns over. We do not know anything about the private lives of any of them beyond what they have chosen to put into a handful of interviews, and I am not going to speculate about it. There are channels that will. I would rather you watched a different program. And we do not know what Margaret would have made of them, because she died in February 2002, when the eldest was 5. Let me finish with the thing I actually think this is about. There is a particular kind of decision that parents make, and almost nobody ever thanks them for it, because by definition, it is invisible. It is the decision not to pass something on. A woman is told at 25 that she cannot have the life she wants. She spends the next 47 years in a version of that same institution, watching every door she wanted stay closed. And then she has 2 children, and she looks at the machinery that did that to her, and she decides they are not going into it. Not that they will get a better position in it. Not that she will fight to have them treated properly. That they are not going in. That is not rebellion. Rebellion is what you do when you are still inside the thing and angry about it. That is something quite different, and I do not think we have a very good word for it. It is closer to a mother standing between her children and something that hurt her and saying, no, that stops here. And I would guess that a good number of you watching tonight have done exactly that in a completely different context and never told anybody. The temper you grew up around and swore would never be in your house. The trade that broke your father and that you would not let your son go into. The church you left, or the one you stayed in. The drinking. The silence at the dinner table that you decided, in your 20s, would not be the silence at yours. Nobody hands you a medal for it. There is no photograph of the thing that did not happen. Your children will grow up not knowing, because the whole point is that they do not know. And if you have done it properly, they will think everybody's family was like that. Princess Margaret has been written about for 70 years as a tragedy. The princess who was not allowed, the sad one, the one who smoked and drank and gave good quotes and was disappointed. And I do not think that is wrong, exactly. But there is a potter, and a royal marine, and a musician, and a jewelry designer, and all 4 of them are extremely private and appear to be perfectly happy, and none of them has ever had to issue a statement about giving up the person they love. That is also her. That is the part of her that worked. So here is my question tonight, and I read every single one of them. What did you decide would stop with you? You do not have to say what it was if you would rather not. But if you broke a chain in your family, if there is something that came down 4 generations and got to you and went no further, I would like to know that it happened. Because I do not think anybody has ever said thank you, and I think tonight is as good a night as any. If this was useful, subscribe. Everything here is sourced. And tonight, almost all of it came from what these 4 people have chosen to say about themselves, which is not very much, and I have not gone looking for anything they did not offer. I am Richard. Thank you for your company. Look after each other.